Hello everyone, welcome to the inaugural episode of Aerodef Manufacturing Dialogue Series. And for the inaugural episode, we have with us Mr. Srinivasan Dwarakanath, commonly known as Dwarka, and he's an industry veteran, currently working as a Director General of Aerospace India Association. He's also advisor to many startups and aerospace and defense organizations around the world, and also former MD or and CEO of Airbus India. Welcome, Mr. Dwarka.
Thank you very much, Nisha.
Thanks. So before we start the conversation, let me just tell you all our audience why we started this series. So as we all know that aerospace and defense industry in India is growing rapidly thanks to the government push for the self-reliance, Atmanirbhar Bharat, private industry participation, and the investment from the global giants from around the world in the defense and aerospace segment. This whole scenarios has created a huge opportunities for the Indian companies, specifically for the MSMEs. So in this series, we are going to discuss the current state of the Indian aerospace and defense industry, opportunities for MSMEs, policy framework, skills needed for the aerospace industry, and future business outlook. So we have with us Dr. Dwarakanath here today, and we are going to discuss all these things today with him. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Dwarakanath.
You're very welcome, Nisha. Thank you.
So, as I said, sir, can you please start the conversation just to set the tone? According to you, what's the current state of India's aerospace and defense manufacturing?
So if you look at India overall, globally on the passenger side, the traffic is growing significantly. So we are the third largest aviation market on one side, and also on the defense side as well. With Atmanirbhar Bharat and all the geopolitical situations where we have, there is a tremendous push to have self-reliance, on the defense side as well. So both are really helping Indian industry to grow, significantly. And what we have also seen is that, countries where they have a good aviation growth, always have the aerospace growth being followed. Maybe there is a lag of 5-10 years, but there is a big push as well. So in India in 2005, we saw a big orders coming from airlines in India, and again in 23-24 we saw big orders coming, and we also know now in the coming Paris Air Show and others there'll be other big orders coming from Air India as well as Indigo as well. So clearly on the passenger side there is a big growth, and we see that this will be followed by a tremendous growth on the aerospace side as well. Similarly, on the defense, we see a big push now, on the self-reliance, and there are lots of startups who are supporting on the space side. Is ISRO, HAL is really looking at using the aerospace ecosystem. They have a lot of backlog in terms of orders as well. And we will see that both aerospace and defense is poised for tremendous growth over the next decade.
You touched upon, commercial aircraft, market. India as a market is growing rapidly. When we talk about, the share of India's manufacturing ecosystem in the supply chain of overall aircraft, we are still lagging behind. According to you, what are the ways we can address this? Offset policies, India's readiness, and because it needs also critical components that needs a different set of skills. So according to you, what are those 4 or 5 things that India needs to do to supply some of the critical parts to the global giants?
That's a very good question, Anishan. And looking at the commercial side, even though we are becoming the third largest in terms of the civil aviation, our contribution to the global supply chain is still very small. If you look at the global supply chain, and it's approximately about $200 billion, and we are less than 1%, today. So yes, global companies are increasing their sourcing from Indian companies, but we, in terms of the companies in India, mostly work on something what we call as build to print. That means we get the design from the global OEMs or the tier ones. We manufacture them in India and export them back to these suppliers as well. But looking at the challenges which global OEMs as well as the tier ones are facing in terms of resources, in terms of availability of skilled labor, in terms of availability of even the cash to really grow the aerospace industry, as well as ability to manage the supply chain. India is poised, to really help the OEMs and tier ones in making that ramp up, because Airbus, if you look at it, they are delivering about 700 odd aircraft, today, and they want to increase their ramp up by 50%, over the next 4 to 5 years. Boeing is already quite behind compared to their own 2019. That itself, in the last year, they were only at the 320 odd aircraft which they delivered, and they will need to double that. Plus, they will also increase the ramp up. So, with that, they are looking at other countries which can help, because their own ecosystem in the US and Europe can help a bit, but not to the extent they are looking at. So that's where I think opportunities for many countries, including India, is there. Now, India has to capitalize on that. You asked a question on what areas we need to focus on. See, on one side, build to print, more suppliers are coming in. I think we will grow there significantly, over the next 10 years. That's not an issue. But beyond the build to print, we also need to really work on IP creation. That is the ability to do our own design, right? Design and manufacturing. How do we do the design? Yes, global companies will give some design, but even our own companies are interested to do our own products, which they will be willing to sell to the tier ones and global OEMs as well. In order to do that, one of the things we need to focus on is certification of these products, with the help of our own government agencies like DGCA, for example. And DGCA are really working very hard on that. And they've had meetings with FAA and ESR, how to go about that. And that is going to be a game changer. And if we are able to certify our own designs, which will then be accepted in Europe and in America. That's the first thing. Otherwise, certification will cost huge amount of money individually to the companies, which is not encouraging them to get into design. But that's the first thing. The second thing we need to really look at is our own raw materials. See, 98% of the raw materials we use in aerospace are imported. And even some of our companies have subsidiaries outside of India, which are qualified to make aerospace material like aluminium. So we are looking at aluminium, we are looking at steel, we are looking at titanium and special alloys. These things, our companies can do it in the country. It's more a question of how do we work with the government so that we can have the right policies, and also how do you work with the global OEMs to certify them in order to really make that in India. That's important. By doing it in India, there are two reasons why it's important. Obviously, the cost structure and others could come down. But beyond that, in aerospace, when you look at the product, it's only 10% of it is actually flying. The remaining 90% goes out as scrap. And in the West, in Europe or America, this 90% scrap gets a good recycling value of 50, 60%. And in India, the suppliers don't get that because they have to put the scrap along with automotive scrap, and that's not really adding value to that. So that way, we would add value as well. That's the second area, we need to focus on. And the third one, we think we need to focus on is across the supply chain, we need to drive quality for manufacturing, because the automotive industry, when ACMA was set up and Society of Indian Automotive Manufacturers, these were set up, they did focus on quality. And we saw a tremendous growth of 20 to 30%, over 30 years in our automotive industry. And we can simulate that, or we can actually do that in aerospace as well. And that's where I think quality is extremely important to focus. Fourth one is skilling. Aerospace skilling. See, whenever we talk about skilling, people immediately think it's skilling at a blue collar level. No, it's across the thing, right from engineers to process engineers who convert the design to manufacturing to operators. All the levels we need to really look at skilling as well. And even recently, we've been talking to both the central government and the state governments as well about having common facilities. It can be common testing facilities, common training facilities, common skilling facilities, common processing facilities, for aerospace and defense in the country. We can have 3, 4 of them within the country, which can support. And this is essential for really bringing up MSMEs as well, because globally, if you look at Europe and US, there are big suppliers, but there are also a lot of MSMEs who really support aerospace, because Aerospace is high skill, low volume activity. So that's something, we need to really look at and see, what it is. And last, there are many others, I'll just highlight one more is that like what we are doing on the defense side, where we are having our own national programs for understandable reasons, geopolitical reasons. We have done our pages on the satellite side. We've done the launching, been to the moon. Now it is time on the civil side, we do our own passenger aircraft. Okay. When I talk about our own passenger aircraft, that doesn't mean that we have to do it completely, right? So we can be part of a global program, like for example, for the next Airbus, single aisle or the next Boeing single aisle, we can partner with them and take part of that cake, to be there. Or we can develop a regional transport aircraft, with the support of one of these global players as well, so Boeing or Embraer or Airbus, so that, we can ensure that, we can have the success in the program in a shorter period of time as well. So that is essential because unless you are part of an aircraft program, no other OEM is going to give their crown jewels to your suppliers. So that's why it is extremely important to be part of it. And we saw tremendous growth in countries like Brazil with Embraer, in Canada with Bombardier, in China with their own COMAC. So having their own programs really catapults the industry, forward. And these countries form part of 10% of the global supply chain, whereas India is only at 1%. So with all these things doing it, we will certainly be able to push India to be more than 10% of the global supply chain. Back to you, Nisha.
Thank you so much, sir. And you have rightly listed all the points that needs to be addressed to get to the level where we can be at least 10% of the overall supply chain. One point I wanted you to, stress upon is also the offset policy. So as we have seen, the offset policy has helped the defense industry largely. We still have not seen such kind of thing happening for the commercial aircraft, whereas we have huge orders making, from India going to various countries. Can government play a role here? And if they do offset policies for commercial aircraft, are we ready to supply those kind of parts?
I think on the commercial side, Nisha, we need to really rethink on how to implement some sort of I would say, a mechanism which encourages our global OEMs to come into India. Like, for example, on the defense side, offset on the program itself has brought some benefits, brought in as well. On the commercial side, looking at countries like, Brazil or Canada or China, what they did. See, I would recommend that we go for something called international cooperation, in terms of how do we cooperate with these countries in order to incentivize them to work with us. Like, for example, if we say that Airbus, Boeing, we work with you, our airlines are working with us. We look at the overall ecosystem and then say that, hey, could we do 5% or 10% of the next aircraft program in India? Okay. It's not an offset, but we are actually giving them the business rationale to do it. So it makes and do everything related to. See, in offset, you have to do, otherwise you have a penalty. And what I meant on the commercial side, I would recommend is that we do the international cooperation by giving them incentives, by giving them the environment, by giving them the appropriate talent and the ability to certify and other things. And that can actually bring in more credibility. And by having that, our suppliers will also become globally competitive, because we want our suppliers to be globally competitive, right? So rather than just only to give to our suppliers as well. So having that international cooperation policy, something slightly different to offset on the commercial side, would definitely help in pushing our industry. And that's my view. Happy to explain more on that.
Sir, from the supply chain point of view, at Airbus, you had led the supply chain verticals when you were in Europe, and also when you were heading the India operation. I'm sure you must be having a lot of suppliers from India as well. So I'm sure you must have dealt with suppliers from India and suppliers from elsewhere, like developed countries like Germany, USA, and UK, France as well. What are the fundamental differences you have observed while dealing with these two, companies from these two different geographies? And what are your suggestions to the Indian MSMEs and suppliers?
There are a few cultural differences in the way in which you approach as well. So I've also looked at, I used to conduct a short course on, doing business with Asia Pacific and the Middle East, right from Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Singapore, India, Middle East as well. Culturally, they're different in the way they approach. And if I just stick to India versus Europe, American, companies. See, Indian companies, or they have a complete entrepreneurial spirit, right? So a can-do attitude. They go out, or to really pull the stops, to get things done. So that really gives a lot of confidence, because in 2015, many of the Indian companies used to come and talk to us with PowerPoint slides saying that this is what we want to do. And they have actually done, and then they really developed, today. And we can see that entrepreneurial spirit is being liked by the OEMs and others. They know how to push and get things done, to do that. While doing that, some Indian companies, what they do is that they don't probably have their own clear strategy of what they want to do. They say that, hey, we have money, please tell us where you want us to invest, and we are ready to invest. But OEMs and tier ones are not looking for that. They are looking for what is yours. Why do you want to be in aerospace? Are you going to be in aerospace? Tell me where you want to be, and then we will support you, rather than you just asking us, where you want us to, asking us to recommend to where to invest. So that's not something which has gone down very, very well. But once you establish a long-term relationship, then it is okay. You can discuss with them, to do that as well. The other point, the good point which I see with Indian suppliers is that many of the Indian suppliers are at build to print at the bottom level of the triangle. If you look at the aerospace triangle, the top one being the final assembly line, and then you have the major component assemblies. The next one is the complex sub-assemblies, and then you have detailed parts. Many of them have started at the detailed parts level, some of them at sub-assembly level. So most of the Indian suppliers are still around that sort of level, and none of them are really at the major component assembly or final assembly in terms of design and manufacturing. But some companies are doing major component assemblies both just on build to print, right? So, but coming here, many of these companies are now looking at, what is their strategy should be. Do they need to expand sideways? Do they need to expand upwards? But many of the Indian companies have the right strategy to also look at buying companies in Europe or America, to be closer to the customers, the OEMs, and to have a market access. And what some of these successful Indian companies have done is really to grow their company in Europe or America and grow here in India as well. That's the recipe, you need to look at, because the capex and the interest rates are cheaper in the West, and the availability of talent and the labor rates and others are better in India. So combining these two is the way to go, and that's something which I would suggest that Indian companies need to look at. When they are moving up, doing their own strategy, how do they increase their footprint in Europe or America to be closer to the suppliers as well? But given the geopolitical situations, the OEMs would appreciate Indian companies having footprints there as well. That's the second thing, which I would look at. And the third thing I would say is that sometimes in Indian companies, we have really strong entrepreneurial leaders at the top. Okay? And they have very good people working in the shop floor and manufacturing. Not all of them really able to bridge the gap between the top guys and the foremen. So really have a professional management all across and have good succession planning. And this is something OEMs have mentioned that to us as well, saying that, hey, this is something we see. This is important moving forward. And that's one area to look at. And lastly is that quality. And many Indian companies are good at driving the quality, and it's extremely important that we drive the quality across the supply chain in manufacturing. And for aerospace, it's extremely important as well. Both in civil as well as in defense, people look for a much higher level of quality coming from the supply chain. That's an area we need to focus. And there are a few others as well, but I'll stop.
Basically, collaboration between the Indian companies with the overseas suppliers can unlock huge potential, according to you, with the specific qualities from both the suppliers.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, see, we don't have an OEM, especially on the commercial side, developing things, right? So we have to deliver to the OEMs or tier ones. Tier one companies are still $1 to $2 billion sort of companies. For Indian suppliers, many of the Indian suppliers are on MSME. So most of them are between I would say 500,000 sort of crores. That sort of even probably less revenue on aerospace. If that's the case, really they will be tier twos to a tier one, and still there is a plenty of opportunity to expand their business. So clearly working with the suppliers, would be a great start. But also once you have grown to a certain level, looking at a smaller company to buy, because what has happened is that during COVID, US and in Europe, some of the smaller companies were not able to survive. So the people left, and the cash became a crunch. And when they want to restart, it always takes time between the order you get and the delivery and getting the cash. And not everybody was able to manage that, cash flow as well. So there's a lot of government support, to sustain things, but there are still opportunities to either invest in a company in Europe and America for the Indian suppliers, or even outright buy them as well, which many have done, from the Indian companies as well. That's also a good really opportunity to get closer to the customer, because customers, trust those suppliers. One of the things to keep in mind in aerospace is it's difficult to become an aerospace supplier, right? It takes time, much more than automotive and other industries. But once you become an aerospace supplier, it's difficult to get out. So because your customers don't want to let you out, right? Yeah. So they want you to be there because they've invested in you, whether it's engineering or manufacturing. So that's the big advantage. So you need to get into aerospace because you are passionate about the industry. Once you get in, then you can make money.
So when you say that, once you become a supplier of any aerospace company, they don't want you to move out again, or they will not let you. But is the entry also has a barrier? Like if someone has started from automotive, they have shifted to, let's say, aerospace, and they want to serve, let's say, companies like Airbus, or let's say tier one suppliers. Is the entry to these companies are tough compared to other industries?
I think entry into aerospace, one, simply because, tier ones and OEMs, if they know their supplier is delivering to the right quality, then there is no incentive for them to change, right? So, cost is important, but cost is not the only driver, right? In automotive industry, probably cost plays much more important role. Aerospace cost is important, but that's not, because quality, reliability of delivery, that these are much more important, right? So, and that's where I think for them to look for a different supplier, either the existing supplier is not providing what they are looking for, or they see the new supplier as a very good capability or good innovation, good product, something which they have done good, which they want to bring it in. So it's important that if when the new supplier says that I have money to invest, I'm going to invest here, please tell me where to invest and can you give me work? That is not the right message to get across. They're saying that, hey, I'm getting into aerospace because I'm coming from automotive industry or coming from other manufacturing or whatever. We want to get into industry. We want to be in detailed parts. We want to work on metallic rather than composites, or composites rather than metallic. We want to do machining rather than sheet metal. This is where focus. This is our next 5 years, and then we want to grow like this. Once you put those strategy and then say this is where, and show your commitment, people will be more than happy to give advice. Okay. So if you just go with them and then say, please give us advice, then they don't take you seriously. So that's what I would say, that once they have it, then you can. Yes, it takes time, because you need to really work with both local, on the defense. This is where the Indian defense really comes in. If you work with ISRO, or if you work with HAL, or other, the drones and other things as well. We have many opportunities for local startups to work as well. So once you start there simultaneously and able to prove your capability, even for a low volume in defense, then it's easy to demonstrate that you have the capability and you have the willingness. So ability that you can deliver, on time and cost and quality as well. You need to prove that, then you're there. And yes, it does take. Initially, you start with tier ones or tier twos even, as your customer, and then you gradually move up the value chain. And that's where we have seen many companies in India like Dynamatics or Acres, and others, I know Call and others, they have done very well, doing that sort of strategy.
Understood. So just a couple of questions from my side more. How do you see the BIS playing role in this? Because I'll give you one example. I know a dealer who kind of import or stock aluminum product from Germany that goes into aerospace components. Now suddenly the BIS came and when they reached out to the principal company, they said that India is just not even a 1% of my overall supply chain, and for that I don't want to do all these BIS related hassle and then checking the meals and all those things. So this is not just a loss for this particular dealer, but also all those tier two, tier one companies who would have made component using this product, because that particular company is I would say, preferred supplier of many OEMs and tier one suppliers for the aluminum parts. So what would be your advice to government dealing with such thing? Because this is just one example I'm giving, but there are many other examples related to materials and machines as well, like 5 axis machine is still coming from outside. So what would be your advice on that?
Bureau of Indian Standards. I think
Yeah.
recently, we found out that some of the aerospace suppliers have raised this issue with us as well. On the steel side, let's start with the steel. Let's start with steel. It's going to follow probably in other areas as well. And there are two or three nuances there. One is that if you want to export, then you need to have special permission. If you have that, then the input output needs to be very clearly defined as well, and that's where the challenge comes. Like for example, in aerospace, as we mentioned, you are not, if you buy, only about 10% of it goes as a part and the remaining goes as a waste, right? So at the end, that input output, big gap, creates some issues as well. So what we did is that, especially on the steel, Ministry of Civil Aviation asked us, saying that, hey, some of the people have raised this as well. In your own, you are raising this. Why don't you write a paper, on that, to say what is the real issue and how do we go about it? So, for example, on the steel, we worked with some of the suppliers here, with Mahindras, with Sansera, and a few other, with JJ Aero, and there are a few others as well. And we had a review presented to say how this can be sorted. Like, for example, there are two issues. And if you are a special economic zone or an export-oriented, you don't face that issue that much. But if you're outside that, and if you are also using your own suppliers, to use those material, then it becomes an issue, really, because, in terms of buying it for your suppliers and giving it, and then managing the, stock becomes an issue. And it takes some time as well. So we have put a paper together, and we discussed with MOCA to say how we can address this, to give exemptions on aerospace, for example, and to have a defined, sort of roadmap for aerospace specifically, and then explain to BIS as well why it is important that aerospace is slightly different. So MOCA has agreed to organize a meeting with BIS, Indian standards as well, and with the association and our members as well, so that we can sort out this problem and take it forward. And we are confident that when we explain how aerospace industry is slightly different to automotive when it comes to imports and the way we use it, we think we can resolve that. And we should do that reasonably quickly, and that's what we are planning to do as well.
So, last question from my side. You have mentioned automotive industry a couple of times, also the success of automotive given the great work done by ACMA and Siam. Also, one of the aerospace veteran who has retired now had told me once during one of the interviews saying that, if given a proper, trust and focus from the government side for the aerospace and defense industry, it can be as big as automotive industry for the, suppliers. How much do you agree to that? And also, you spoke about ACMA and SIAM, and you have recently formed Aerospace India Associations. So, would you like to talk a little bit about the agenda of that as well, along with how we can replicate the success of what we have seen in automotive to the aerospace industry as well?
I fully agree, whoever that automotive veteran you're mentioning, because it's extremely important that we work between the government, academia, and industry, bring them together with a clear focus, and once we do that, then we can succeed. And ACMA has done a great job in doing so, because I started my career with automotive industry, so I can say that as well. Whereas this is also a thought process behind setting up of the Aerospace India Association itself. What we want to do is that we want to be the widely recognized torchbearer of the aerospace industry. Really, civil side, we're supporting defense and space as well. I know, even though we may be inclined a little bit more on the civil aviation and on the aerospace side. What we want to establish is a robust design and manufacturing ecosystem in partnership with the industries and the OEMs and tier ones around the world as well. So that's really what we are looking at, and support the government's Make in India Atmanirbhar Bharat vision. So with that, with our vision and mission are very clear. Our vision is really to drive sustainable aerospace programs in the country. So that is really, whether it is on the passenger side, supporting the defense as well as the drones, or any of the product development aerospace programs we want to drive, specifically on the aerospace and on the civil side as well. But what is more important for us is our mission statement. Really, we want to create a robust ecosystem for design and manufacturing, including raw materials with maximum value add in the country. So this is a 4 elements to it, and it's pregnant with meaning, right? So aerospace design and manufacturing, raw materials, maximum value add. That means that the design is done, the raw material is coming from India. The manufacturing is done there as well. The second part of our mission is to really become global leaders in aerospace product design and manufacturing by driving quality across the supply chain. So it's design quality, manufacturing quality. How do we drive that? And so these are sort of 2 areas we're really focusing on. And we have in our association core members. We would have up to 15 core members who really drive the association. Then we have Indian, and these are Indian companies, and that we have Indian companies as members as well. But we also have global members, global companies becoming members, for our association. We have honorary members who would be the global OEMs, and we have patrons like the NAL, who will be there, in the association as well. So that's how we are structured. And we are still very young. We started in October, registered the association, and then December we did the inauguration. Now we have, after the Aero India show, a lot of members, and we are working with them. And we are also associating ourselves with the global, aerospace associations like, BDLI in Germany or ADS in the UK. We are trying to work with GFAS. And we are also partnering with similar associations in this part of the world, like Malaysian Aerospace Association. We have reached out to Indonesia as well. So that, we need to really look at that there is a place when we do competition, that there is also an opportunity for cooperation and collaboration with these as well. So that's the mission with which we are driving.
Thanks for sharing, and wish you best with your mission and vision for the Aerospace India Association, sir. And thank you so much for sharing all the information. We discussed about opportunities for MSMEs, how collaboration can unlock so many opportunities for the cross the value chain in the from OEM to the bottommost tier 3 suppliers, BIS policy framework, and many other things. Thank you so much for sharing all the information with us. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nishant, and thanks for the opportunity. It's always lovely talking to you, and let's be in touch.